You rise up in the morning beneath the stars so bright. Pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horses kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. You'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight.
Howdy there, I'm Matt McKinley and we're burning daylight.
In the saddle till the job's done right.
Welcome to Burnin' Daylight, the only podcast for the working cowboy. Well, howdy there, daylight burners. Welcome back to another edition of Burnin' Daylight. And today I got a special guest on. I've been trying to get a hold of him for a little while now, and I was telling him before we got going. His music is pretty regular, frequent occurrence on just about any playlist in my household. My kids love his music. My wife loves his music. My sister-in-law and her girls love his music, and then just about every working cowboy west of the Rockies knows who Dave Stamey is. And so without further ado, Dave, thank you once again for joining the show, and welcome to Burnin' Daylight, the podcast for the working cowboy.
My pleasure. Happy to be here. Thank you very much for having me, Matt. Appreciate it.
You betcha. So I got introduced to you, and I say west of the Rockies. I grew up just a little bit east of the Rockies in the southeast corner of Colorado. Kind of in homesteader territory. And
so did I. I was raised east of the Rockies as well.
Where did you grow up at?
Yellowstone County, Montana.
Okay. So you were sure enough up in cow country. My part of the world was cow country during the beef boom, and then around the turn of the 20th century, the government made a real big push to settle that part of the land, and the big ranches kind of dried up, and homesteaders moved in, and so everything got parceled into quarter sections, it seems like. And then when I moved out to Nevada, it's a whole different style of cowboying.
That's for sure.
It, like, everything kind of changes once you get west of them Rocky Mountains, and and it's a whole different culture. We're doing the same dang job, but it's a whole different way of doing it.
Yeah, the Great Basin as a whole, it's a entity of in and of itself, obviously.
Mm-hmm. So how long had your family been up in Montana when you were born? Like how long y'all been up there?
Not very long at all, actually. I wish I could claim a homesteader status and have a tie, that deep of a tie to a piece of geography, but I don't. My dad came from the South, and he went to Montana because he had the ungainly idea of wanting to become a cattle rancher. He was very enamored with the West and the whole idea of that. And so we went up there just before I was born. So I was like I was the first the first installment of that legacy, if you will.
I see. That's well, he picked a sure enough tough place to raise cattle. I mean, I don't know if there's
Yes, he did. He continued to do that all through his career.
You know, I think some of those places on the coast of California are about as close as it gets to having an easy time raising cattle, and that's still not real easy. But it's everywhere else in the West is pretty kind of a pretty tough place to live, really.
Now, other than we ended up on the coast of California when I was about 13. We had a couple of what you would call a economic disasters in my dad's ranching career, and he married a California girl, and the last economic disaster we went through would have been about 1970, 71, somewhere in there. And my mother said she'd had just about enough of it that she could take, and she didn't care much for. It wasn't the cattle business as much as it was the unreasonable weather.
Yeah.
And so we headed west to the central coast of California, and it's as far as the weather goes, yeah, it's a little more agreeable, but that's the only upside to it. We left Montana. I mean, he sold the ranch, and we left Montana, and we ended up with about 20 acres in California, and 20 acres on a sand dune is where we ended up. 20 acres on a sand dune, and that's just about enough grass to raise half a cow.
Yeah.
And so if you build a feedlot, you can raise them, and that's what we ended up doing. We ended up operating a feedlot operation there in San Luis Obispo County for a decade or so, and that all kind of went to hell in 1970, 73 or 74. I'm trying to think of when the big crash came. And most any of your listeners who were in the cow business during that period will know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, and, yeah. There was there's been a few of those over the years. So you moved even further up the list of the people people I wanted to talk to, because I've been a feedlot cowboy for about I think I started in 2009, and I've been aside from a couple months here and there, I've been in the feedlot ever since, and it's it's treated me pretty well as far as economically and keeping a family and whatnot. But you always catch a little hell from the other cowboys that work out on the big open stuff. And
well, that's all well and good, but there's only a few spots for folks to work out on the big open, and the rest of us have to scramble around the best we can.
That's kind of how I view it. And by the time I realized there was some big open country and outfits that still went out on a wagon, because like I said, I kind of grew up in farmer country. People ran cattle, but it was, I mean, it's really sectioned off pretty good down in that part of the world. There's very little public land, and not many. 1,000 acres is a pretty big pasture in southeast Colorado. And then I get out to Nevada, and I was like, oh, I've been missing out my entire life. I just didn't know it was out here. And by that time, though, I got a wife and 2 kids, and that's a camp job.
That kind of work is for 19-year-olds.
Yeah. That those camp jobs don't bode well for a married fella.
Not for very long.
No, not you might have a hell of a time out on that wagon, but your wife had a hell of a time moving out of your house while you were gone.
That can happen. I imagine that's happened many times.
Yeah, it's kind of the bane of the cowboy existence, because once you get married, the sure enough cowboy shit that you wanted so bad when you were younger, that kind of, like, slowly but surely it kind of chips away at you, the more people you have looking up to you.
Well, you have people who are depending on you to take care of them, and it becomes more and more difficult to do that if you're out sleeping in a teepee.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And as fun as the job is, it usually don't pay all that well. And there's a
it never does, as far as I know.
Yeah, I mean that's why I've been in the feedlot the whole time, is because I've I've never been turned down from a ranch job, but I've turned down plenty of them because they couldn't afford me. I got a little used to the feedlot wages, and you're just like, I mean, I'm not trying to be cocky. It just kind of is what it is. These guys pay pretty well, and they treat me all right. So I get to go play real cowboy on the weekends here and there.
Well, I'd be a little less. I might say that the idea of being a real cowboy is a relative term.
Mm.
It's there are different aspects of being a real cowboy, depending on where you are and what you are doing. I mean, there's still the work to be done, whether you're doing it in a feedlot or whether you're doing it out on a wagon, or whether you're doing it for a neighbor during branding season. I mean, you're still cowboying.
Yo, I think so too. I always kind of define it as it's a guy on a horse taking care of a cow is kind of
pretty much it. That's basically it. Everybody can, and it's done all the time. People are they can turn their nose up to another aspect of the work, but it's all in the same. It's all in the same world.
Yeah, that's kind of how I view it, and I think really the only thing that distinguishes cowboy from like herdsman or whatever is the fact that you do it a horseback. That's kind of what sets the cowboy apart, and it's there people have their own thoughts of what a cowboy should be, and then you'll hear people start listing the traits they want in a cowboy, and more often than not, when they do that, they'll list traits that have nothing to do about whether or not a guy can take care of a cow or horseback. And you're just like, man, I know you want a God fearing man that doesn't cuss and takes his hat off inside and bows to the ladies, but I don't know. Can the guy go? Can he blow to a cow and get him roped and tied down or handled for somebody to pick up back feed, or can they pull a calf like that? That's kind of what I'm looking for in a cowboy.
I agree. It's a man who can do the work, and all the rest of that is that's gilding on the lily, if you will. It's frosting on the cake.
Yeah, it's more towards the character of a man rather than the can you do the job? And it's yeah, I've had people called apply for jobs, and they'll I had a gal from Oklahoma that just really went on and on about how she had won the Oklahoma State finals on this in the barrel racing on this horse, and she had raised it up from 2-year-old and did all the training herself. And I said that is really impressive, but we're looking for somebody to take care of bottle calves. So can you do that? I guess that's what I'm asking.
And you know what? There's a cowboy aspect to that job as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is, and I like I said, I wasn't trying to put her down. I was like, you're barking up the wrong tree with that line of appraisal of yourself, because I like as impressive as it might have been, and I don't know if I never saw the horse. I never she didn't call me back after that, but I said that's fine, but like we don't run barrels at the here,
they're exactly right. It's we kind of need your horse to put his head down and go to work. We don't need him to have his head in the air and want to run real fast everywhere he goes.
Right. It was
and it's really hard to feed bottle calves from the back of a barrel racing horse.
Yeah, I've never done it, but I can't imagine it'd be all that fun. And and it was just I appreciate that the skill that you're telling me, but it is completely irrelevant to the job that I'm wanting you to do. So,
sure.
And it's funny. There's certain songwriters that you just the way you phrase stuff and and the way you describe stuff, you can tell you've been around this business quite a while, and it makes your songwriting so much more appealing because it's guys that are out there a horseback can really connect with the words you're saying. When did you get into to start writing songs and playing guitar, and I guess when do you think this or when did you pick up a guitar, I guess?
Oh my goodness! Well, I picked up a guitar when I was about 12 or 13 years old, that's usually the age that whatever is going to bite you um, is going to bite you about that age. Whether you're going to be a cowboy. And of course, and I had the cowboy bug from the time I was 4 years old. If you maybe even earlier than that.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the guitar thing, that happened about 12 or 13, and I started banging on a guitar. It was a Monkey Ward's um, 3/4 size, kind of a yellow looking thing. I don't even know if it was made out of wood, to be honest with you. I think it was, but the strings were so far off the neck at the 12th fret, you could probably use that guitar to slice cheese. It was a terrible instrument, just an instrument from hell, if you will. And if you really wanted to learn, you had to really want to learn to play guitar to get it done on that instrument. But I did. I mean, it was my family was rural and in the cattle business, and of course, which means that you had little, if any, money whatsoever. No free money, no discernible what you would call what do they call it, income, the income that you can use for frivolous things. We didn't have
Disposable
any
income, yeah.
disposable income. There you go. So anyway, I ended up with a cheap, $25 guitar.
If you're where you grew up is anywhere like where I grew up, you were poor, but nobody wanted to admit it. Everybody was too proud to admit that you were poor.
Well, it never came up in conversation because everybody we knew was in the same boat.
Yeah, that's kind of right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. So you had no idea you were poor. It was just that was what the situation was. And so I banged around on that for several years, and the old man would come in and get me and go, "What the heck's the matter with you, boy? Get the heck out of here. We got work to do. What are you doing sitting around your bedroom plinking on that guitar? Get your butt outside. We got work to do."
Mm.
Anyway, that went on for several years, and I wasn't writing songs then or anything like that. And I put a little band together about the time that I graduated from high school, and I took a couple of runs at college that didn't take, and I abandoned that pretty quick because the college thing, they wanted you to show up like every day, and I wasn't really ready to commit to that. And we didn't have any universities around us. Well, I take that back. They had Cal Poly, but that was a little beyond our financial abilities to do anything. So you would you'd go to community colleges and things like that. And I lost interest in that after about 20 minutes. And, because I needed to do something else. It wasn't my deal. And I had gone to work for the Phelan Brothers in Roy Grande, California, when I was about 16, 17 years old, and that was an educational experience right there, because we had, like I say, growing up, we ran a feedlot at our little 20-acre deal where we had 300 head of feeder steers in a dry lot, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I understood that, but I went to work for Phelan's, and they had thousands of head of cattle up there, and not that was anything I had to deal with, because my job was cleaning feed bunks with a big scoop shovel and cleaning out water troughs with a big yellow brush. That was my experience with that particular feedlot. But it still seemed a little bit more appealing than going to a community college where you wanted to talk about English 101 and that kind of nonsense. So I bowed out of that pretty quick and went to work in the bars, playing music with a little 4-piece band that I put together. And after about, I want to say 3 or 4 years, I mean, that was the only place there was to work if you wanted to play music, was in the bathrooms. And I got a belly full of that pretty quick. After about 3 years or 3 or 4 years, I had all I needed of that. And I just walked away from it. I didn't pick up the guitar again for probably 10 years. I was in my early 30s before I ever picked up a guitar again seriously.
Huh. Well, what'd you do in the meantime? You just
I work for outfitters. Mostly in the eastern slope of the Sierra Nevada mountains.
Okay.
Yeah, I pack mules basically is what I do.
I've met several guys that did that. I feel so many times, especially my first, I guess, real cowboy job was right out of college. I went up to northern Montana on the High Line, and I worked for a pretty big outfit out there. And I did not realize what a flatlander I was until I had to go build fence in the mountains. And
now where were you at as far as on the High Line?
Big Sandy.
Part of the High Line I know about, there's only like 2 or 3 rocks and one tree between there and one barbed wire fence between there and Canada. And it's pretty flat. I mean, were you on the west side or?
We were kind of on the south side of the High Line. We were at a Big Sandy, but we had a place right up against the Bear Paws.
Oh, okay, sure.
And yeah, so it was that was a whole different. Because I built plenty of fence out on the plains, but man, when you'd come to a tree where the wire was rotted out, and there was like 6 different splices from every single year where that wire rotted out because they stapled it to the tree, and I was like, man, this living on the plains.
Remember, like I say, there's only 4 trees up there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was pretty wild how quick it turned into plains too. It was there was that one spot there in the Bear Paws, and we were kind of surrounded by hills, but it was it was a fairly big valley, and then there was
that's southwest of Havre, right? I mean, I'm trying to get that in my head where it's at.
Yeah, and it's kind of like southeast of Fort Benson.
Oh, right, yeah, got it. Okay, so now if you go east, you go just a little bit east of there, and it's it's like a tabletop out there.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Well, and the thing is that I was just up in Montana 2 days ago. I was doing a show at a ranch. It would be in south of Ennis, south of Alder, Virginia City area there, not too far from the Idaho border. And there's a lot of mountainous regions there. It's in Madison County, right along the Madison River. And I was having a discussion with someone there about how I enjoyed the topography there, because there wasn't, even though it was western Montana, if you will, there was not, or southwestern Montana, there was not a whole bunch of trees and mountains in the way of stuff. And for me, it's not Montana until I get east of Big Timber.
Okay.
Because that's where I was raised, and again, I was about 3 weeks ago, I was in Wyoming, near Cheyenne, and right there in that part of Wyoming is where the high plains start. And it really brought back to me just how much of a Plains kid that I was, because it just lit me up. It just lit me up to see that kind of country.
I'm the same way. I'm a Plains. I live I live here in Smith Valley, Nevada now, and so
Oh, I know that country real well. You betcha.
it's beautiful country. I love it now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's Honeywell country up there.
Yeah.
Sure, you bet.
Yeah.
Good folks, good friends with all those folks.
Yeah, it's one of the well, it's horrible to live here, so don't move here, but it's good for honorary fellows like me.
I got my eye on that country right now. Let me tell you, I really do. Because, I need to get out of California.
Man, we went to the coast for spring break, and I get why people move to California. It is the most beautiful place on earth, but man, there's too many people and too many people that think way different than I do.
Well, yeah, I love the state. I just hate the politics.
I'm the same way. I grew up in Colorado, so we kind of grew up hating Californians because they ruined Colorado, and then I moved out here, and half the ranchers here in the valley, most of the ranchers here in the valley, they summer in California, so they're Nevada residents, but they spend a lot of time in California, and that there's good people over there too. It's just they get outnumbered pretty quick when you go to those cities. What was so you when did you start playing in the bars? You said that was like 71 or so?
Oh yeah, it would have been later than that. Let's see when it was. It would have been in the late 70s.
Okay.
I quit probably in let's see, when did I get married? I quit probably in the early 80s. I quit the bars and went back to work packing mules for various outfitters, and like I say, I didn't pick up the guitar seriously for a long time. And then my wife decided at one point, she said, you're gonna take these people on these pack trips and all this other stuff. You really ought to take your guitar and play a little music for them. And I thought, I don't want to do that. That's nah. I don't want to do that. And she said, no, go ahead. It'll be fun. People will like it. And I said, well, all right. And I had a pretty cheap guitar. I wasn't worried about it. Throw in the back of a mule, and in a burlap sack or something. And that's where it started. Actually, that's where it started. Probably in the oh my goodness, when did this start? Probably in the very late 80s, early 90s. I started playing music again.
Okay. So
and that's sort of when I started writing songs. It was about that time.
Okay. What was that like playing in the late 70s in California though? Because you were, I mean, I guess the counterculture scene was still kind of there, but it kind of, you missed the peak of it, I guess. Like early 70s, you would have been right in the middle of that counterculture stuff there in California.
Well, it wasn't on the menu for me.
I wouldn't figure it was, but like surely you butted up against it pretty,
Oh, occasionally. The whole thing is that my whole career has been a series of almost near misses.
Oh,
yeah, it's the counterculture. I never got near it. It was because I was playing. If I was playing in the bars, I was playing to oil field workers.
Oh, okay.
I was playing to rednecks. I was playing to. It was beer and a shot kind of outfits that I was working at.
I see.
Yeah, so I never got into San Francisco or Los Angeles or went to the Fillmore or any of those places you hear about. No, I was at the Mullet Kintyre Saloon. I was at the Hydrant Saloon. I was at places that was like Bakersfield or Bakersfield West. It was all shot and beer and steel-toed boots, and all of the girls all dressed right off the rack at Walmart. It was or at Kmart rather. It was pretty Bakersfield West, if you will, where I was working. So
Okay.
yeah, I never I never ran into the hippies at all.
Okay. That's well, and you if you're not from California, I guess probably even if you're from California, like you forget how big of a state it is too. Like I mean, it covers a lot of country.
It sure does, and the areas that I worked was it was the Central Valley. It was what they called the Central Coast, which was pretty. It wasn't as thickly populated at all, but it was an oil field world. I mean, there was an oil boom going on at the time.
Yeah. Huh.
Vitalis drift off many a comb.
Mm.
In those, and a shot in a beer was $3.95, and people wanted to hear Buck Owens and Will Haggard, and that's what I played.
There you go. It's $3.95. I was in I guess it'd been the L.A. airport the other day, and I ordered a Bloody Mary, and a guy sat down next to me. He goes, "What did that cost?" And I said, "I don't know, probably too much." And so I'll let you know when they bring me my check, because I had to catch my plane pretty quick after, and it was $21 plus a 20% gratuity already added on. And I showed him the ticket, and I said, "Yeah, it was way too much." He's like,
"Wow."
I already ordered one, so that was, I felt sick almost.
That's amusing. Let that be a lesson to all your listeners.
Yeah, I think that's why the airport beers are some of the best beers, because they just cost so damn much. Savor it. So when you got back into it again, how because like you've did you produce your own stuff and put it out yourself, or did you sign with a label, or how did that? I'm really, like, I'm not very well versed on how the music world works. I know I like
neither am I. Yeah, neither am I, actually. Now, no, everything I've ever done, I've produced myself, and I've never been hooked up with a label. I've done some stuff for a different label, but I've never been contracted to any of them. The only other label that ever worked that ever had anything to do with me wanted to do a live album, and that's the only thing that I've ever done with them.
But
as far as any of the studio albums that I've ever done, I've always self-produced that. They've always come out under my own name, and I don't have ties, nor do I have obligations hooked to anybody else but myself. And it's all kind of an in-house thing. It's a mom and pop sort of a situation, and cottage industry, if you will. But I've done it all on my own, all by myself, and never, I gathered all the musicians, and here's the tracks. Here's what we're going to do. Let's try it. Let's go. And it just sort of worked out that way.
It seems like it worked out good, and it's one of the crazy things I've learned about the music world is like you're in a better situation than most because you own all the stuff that you already made.
Yes, sir.
And that's it's something crazy to think about, but a lot of these huge artists that they write these songs that'll live on for generations, and they don't own a bit of it.
I had in the late 90s, probably 1998 or so, I got approached by some folks in Nashville who wanted to take charge of my publishing, and I considered it, and until a friend of mine who lived in Nashville and who knew the business told me that if I signed this contract, but the people I was signing the contract with could make the decision that I couldn't record my own stuff, and they would be the one to decide who got to record it. And I said, well, I don't hardly think so. That's not what I want at all. And I backed out of that really, really quick. And
well, I don't blame you.
Yeah, I can say with pride that I have never, from that day forth, had any interaction with mainstream country music, if you will, at all, whatsoever. Because that sort of chicanery just was beyond my ken. I really couldn't even fathom the idea of the fact that you could write a song and then somebody else had the right to tell you whether or not you could record it.
It seems crazy.
Well, it's that world, and we came to an agreement back then, Nashville and myself, that hey, number one, they weren't interested in much of what I did, and I certainly wasn't interested in how they did it.
Well, that's a win-win on that situation then.
Well, I went on and ended up having an okay career in spite of them, and they haven't bothered me since.
That's fun. How much radio playtime have you ever got throughout your career?
Oh, good Lord. Marcel Marceau gets better airplay than I do. Folks like yourself will give me more airplay than I get. Very, very little airplay whatsoever. It's all done word of mouth.
Well, it's kind of funny because I'm fairly new to the cowboy music world, like I said, because I grew up east of the Rockies and closer to Kansas than I was to the Rocky Mountains, and so the cowboy music scene was not real heard of. My dad had a couple of older guys that he knew, and there was Chris Ledoux. That is about all we knew. And then when I was in high school,
I got a story about that. So go ahead.
Well, I can't wait to hear it. But just to wrap it up, so like then as I moved into like late high school and into college, I got introduced to the Texas, Oklahoma country music scene, and that's as it's kind of in the cowboy world too. It's a completely different deal from Nashville.
Oh, absolutely.
And same way, like it would all spread word of mouth until the social media thing popped up. But that's kind of the scene that I cut my teeth on, where I consider myself kind of first and foremost as a red dirt country fan. That's classic rock and red dirt country. And then as I've moved out here to Nevada, I've been out here 6 years now. I've got introduced to all these cowboy artists. I knew Corb Lund from college, but that bled into some of the generation before, like yourself, and so it's just it's been the same type of journey, just from one community to the other.
Absolutely, yes. The red dirt thing, I've always been very impressed with the Texas music scene, because that's the only state in the union that I'm aware of has their own music charts. And I occasionally make forays into Texas if I'm asked. I don't tour there on a regular basis because Texas is pretty insular, if you will.
Yeah.
And to work in Texas, you pretty much got to live in Texas, and I was given that to understand quite early on. But anyway, you mentioned Chris Ledoux, and Chris was actually an early influence as far as the idea that you could do this on your own for me. He won the world in 1976.
I think so, yeah.
As a bareback rider, and his son Ned, who and this is sort of a sideline, who is a wonderful, wonderful human being, and is carrying on the tradition very, 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 very well. I've worked with him a couple of times in Nashville, and I have been very impressed with him just as a human being, let alone as an artist. But anyway, at one point in my career, I decided I was going to be a bareback rider, and I was given to understand quite early on that I was not any good at it.
The cowboy world is pretty blunt, isn't it?
Well, no, it wasn't anything about that. It was the fact that just the performances that I put in. I mean, they used to have to scrape me off the arena floor so they could close the chute gates. I mean, it was that bad. I've never been that good at riding bad horses at all, and for some reason, I decided at age 19 that this is what I should be doing. Anyway, that lasted not very, very, very long, and I remember I was back behind the chutes at the Elks Rodeo in Santa Maria, California, and this was in 1977, and I would have been about 19, I think, at the time. And they had just scraped me up again off the floor, and I was sitting back behind the chutes there, licking my wounds, and here comes Chris Ledoux. And of course, I thought he was going to be 19 foot tall and have a glow of angels about him and this whole thing, but he was like a regular guy, and but he went by and he nodded and smiled and he acknowledged me, and I was sitting there, and I looked at him and I said, "You want to buy a bareback rig?" And he said, he looked a little startled, and he said, "No, I'm good, thanks." I said, okay, see ya. And so I have the distinction of being the guy in 1977 who tried to sell Chris Ledoux a bareback rig. But at the same time, he was selling cassette tapes out of the back of his car, and record albums at the same time. And before Garth Brooks ever discovered him, he had sold millions of these things just out of the back of his car. And as I looked back on it, as I got a little older and actually got into the business, I said, well, I guess you don't have to be in Nashville. You know, you can do this on your own. Chris had a viable career and a very successful career as a musical artist, way before Chris Ledoux did that song about what you're going to do with the cowboy, or not? No, what was that song? It was
Too Damn Young to Feel This.
Too Damn Young to Feel This Old. Yeah, exactly right. Worn out tape for Chris Ledoux.
Yeah,
and he'd been out there doing it for years before that song ever came out. So he was a great inspiration for me, not necessarily about the music itself, but the fact that you could be a businessman and make this work.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I figured out the same thing with this podcast thing. Is I grew up around cowboys. They were more kind of, I guess you'd call them cowpuncher type than they were, Great Basin type. But it's all the same people.
Yes, it is. And we should never forget that.
Right. And I always remember it's like the best stories, whether they be like the most heartfelt or funny or entertaining or just like have you on the edge of your seat, has always come from working cowboys and military guys that have served in combat. Like they like, bar none, those are the two favorite people I want to hear stories from. And I knew a bunch of these older guys that I grew up listening to that I always thought I wish that was in a book somewhere. And the cool thing about technology is now I can just call them like I'm calling you, and now we have these conversations on tape. I can tell me about that time when, whatever, and it, and you can do it by yourself. And there's, there's something about that not being tied to anything except what you want to do.
Exactly right. You do it on your own. You can make this happen, and in spite of what someone might tell you.
Right. And
yeah,
it's been really cool to see that. And the awesome thing about the cowboy world is not all guys like to talk, but if you get a couple other guys telling stories, they're going to pitch in at some point, and it's the guy that doesn't like to talk that's always has the best story. And and it just and the community is like it's all like everything good comes down through word of mouth. Like you might hear something on the radio, an advertisement, but that's like 5 years after the fact when everybody knew they made good stuff. And like everything good cowboy wise starts word of mouth.
I believe that's true, and my whole career has been based on word of mouth.
That's really cool. And it's funny. It was word of mouth. It was somebody who I don't know. I don't even know how they found my podcast, but I started about 4 years ago, and somebody, how I got introduced to you, I guess, was somebody. I think I always end my show with a song that either fits the episode or something that I think is a good song for the day or whatever. And so I always end the show, move your ass, we're burning daylight, and then it goes into a song. And I said, if anybody's got a request, let me know. And somebody requested the Bronx Ballet and then Buckaroo Man by Dave Stamey. And I said, all right, I've never heard these before, but I'll check them out. And now I'm talking to Dave Stamey on the podcast that introduced me to Dave Stamey, and it's pretty wild. All came through word of mouth.
Yep, that's what happens, and that's the best kind of advertising there is. I mean, you can throw money at a magazine or a book or whatever it is you're going to do, or newspapers or what have you, or radios, and it doesn't really work. It's not as effective as the guy out there on the ranches who's discovered your music, and he's passing it around to his friends, and they pass it around to their friends, and that's the kind of advertising that has worked for me.
It's really cool because the gal that finally put us in touch was Lydia Diers, and she had saw you at a show before and had told you about me. I finally got to meet you in Elko, and then she ran into you at a show that she did up in Washington, and finally I got a picture of your phone number on a napkin from a wedding, and I was like, yeah, that is the most that's cowboy shit right there.
It is, yeah, pretty much.
And
pretty much.
And but it all started word of mouth, and it's like, I don't know, you're a pretty big inspiration to me when you talk about, just kind of doing it by yourself, and maybe you don't have the number one hits or whatever, but like you're a staple within the community that you choose to serve, and that's I think that's better than a lot of fame sometimes.
Well, the thing that I keep in my head all the time is the fact that the rural American West is one of the most underrepresented portions of the population of this country. They never get anything in the mainstream media. Nobody ever pays attention to them. Newspapers don't. The television doesn't. Radio, of course, doesn't. And if I don't tell their story, nobody is going to tell their story. And that to me, my life's work is to celebrate that portion of the population, because that's the world I grew up in. That's the world I still exist in, those are the people I know. Those are the people I care about, and they never get their fair share of attention in the modern media right now. 10 to 12 years ago, I'm trying to remember when it was, that big Atlas storm that came through the Dakotas in October.
Yeah.
And it devastated hundreds and hundreds of small ranchers. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of head of cattle and horses were wiped out. And these ranchers were decimated. I mean, all through the Dakotas and even as far down as Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing was, nobody in the major media outlets paid attention to that. No one talked about it. No one mentioned it. No one did a story on it. I mean, if they did, it was a brief thing, and they went back on because everybody was more concerned about the government shutdown that was supposed to happen under Obama. I don't know what they were fighting back and forth, and that's the only thing they wanted to pay attention to. And I was so angry. I was so disgusted that it just made me more determined to continue to tell that story, because obviously nobody else was going to do it, and that's what puts the wind underneath my wings. That's what gives me the impetus to keep going, is the fact that these people that I grew up with, these people that I know so well, are being ignored. And I said, that ain't right. That is not right, and I'm going to do my best to correct that.
Well, it comes through in your songs. I can tell you're somewhat of a student of history too. Just that Montana Homestead song. I could listen to that thing hours on end on loop, just because I just play through my mind what it would have been like for those people. Like they're trying to make something out of a place where the Indians don't stay in the winter. They migrate south.
That's right. Yeah, and that's that country southeast of Miles City in Montana, which is where that was based. I actually, when I wrote that song, I had been touring up through that country, and I made a complete off the graph kind of a run. It wasn't even my circle of jobs that I had scheduled. I had a couple of days off, and I made a specific point of traveling back east. And I know that country from when I was a kid, but I wanted to make sure I had it right in my head. You know, and I wrote the song. You're talking about country southeast of Hardin and Ismay, that kind of country. It was opened up by the railroads, and they actually tried to suck people into coming out and settling that country, because the railroad wanted farmers to have that would be using the railroad to ship their products out of the area. So at that time, there was a belief that if you plowed the ground and roiled up the ground, that would actually cause rain to be attracted to your area.
The rain will follow the plow.
Rain will follow the plow, and that was an actual belief. That was an actual theory that people ascribed to. Yeah. As recently as the early 1900s, they believed that.
All the way up to like the 1920s in on the Great Plains. I mean, they have you ever read the book The Worst Hard Time?
Absolutely, I have.
That's
a great book. Now, there's another book out that a guy named Robson, I think Robson or Rabson, I can't think of his name. It was called Bad Land.
Okay, I'll look that up.
It was specifically about this. That's actually the inspiration that I got from that. The fact that I had lived not too far away from where this happened, book, and it just brought it all home to me, and that's where that song came out of.
Okay, so I grew up about a 40-minute drive from Boise City, Oklahoma, which in the worst hard time they ascribe as the geographic center of the Dust Bowl.
Yeah,
And
you bet.
and so like my grandpa was about 45 miles away from there in an open cab tractor, just trying to make something grow at all,
Sure.
you know. And a few, like 25 years before that, it was nothing but just grass, buffalo grass as far as the eye could see.
Yeah.
And it was, yeah, it was that whole the rain will follow the plow.
Yeah,
And they
exactly.
something about us, I think they said like 30 million acres is what they ended up plowing up in the Great Plains, and lost who untold generations worth of topsoil.
Yeah, well,
Once that.
exactly. I mean, that's what brought the Dust Bowl on, was that, and it was wheat primarily,
Mm-hmm.
that they were that was causing that, and rather than throttling back on the wheat, when the price fell, they would just double their production and work twice as hard for
Mm-hmm.
the same, which seems kind of like the cowboy music business, actually. When I think about it.
Yeah, it's kind of like every working man's deal. Like, even if it's gonna hurt you in the long run, I gotta do something to make it through today, so I'll just work harder.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
It's yeah, it's wild, that whole it's just funny trying to, like, going back and looking at that stuff, and then trying to follow the thread all the way up to today, and then like how did something like, and you think, like, that was a long time ago, but in the vast reality, it wasn't that long ago. It was my grandpa. uh he weathered the Dust Bowl, lot of thanks to the New Deal programs, which later led on to, like, not be real good for the country. But at the time, I mean, man, there was a lot of New Deal Democrats there on the Great Plains, that they were able to survive the Dust Bowl in a place they probably shouldn't be living. But they made it, and now they're still trying to make a stand there. And it's like, I don't know, those stories from the Dust Bowl, they run deep. Like, I mean, that stuff was really drilled in my head as a kid about, like, how bad it can get.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
And
absolutely.
I don't know. It seems like maybe some of those folks in the cities don't have quite that tie to it, but man, they're
Oh, they don't have a clue. It never affected them, and other than being inconvenient when the dust went rolling
right.
through the.
It's kind of like
Well,
the smoke back east nowadays. They're
exactly
bitch.
right. And they're making a big mess about the smoke coming down from Canada, and it's like, well, yeah, but what about the smoke that came out of Montana 45 years ago? Nobody said anything about that.
Yeah,
Nobody's
or
talking.
just two. I think it was 2 summers ago. I mean, we had like 6 weeks of that out here.
No,
You know.
yeah, we get it all the time out here in California,
Yeah.
and it's well, anyway, we could keep going down this road, but we're
Yeah.
getting
No.
into politics, and I don't know if that's where we need to go.
We could, but it's it just it is funny how different the, like, I had I guess it was just the disconnect, and I always kind of wonder where that went, like, when that went awry, when that, like, there's always been some sort of disconnect between urban and rural, but like here lately, it seems like it's really gone awry. But I had a history professor on here a while back. He's a Chicago guy. Like, he's kind of known as like his specific area of history is Chicago, and he's wrote several books on he's a Polish guy. He's like a his grandpa was a Polish immigrant. Went to work as an unskilled worker in the meat packing plants, and and then he grew up he went to work in the Union stockyards at the final days of it in the 70s. When there was like he worked all the way through like the the big riots at the Democratic National Convention in
Oh, 68.
1968.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and had buddies on his block that got drafted and went to the Vietnam War, and he was going to college, and he wrote this incredible story about the Union stockyards, and he really took took it from the point of just telling the story without trying to push a narrative. It just like tell the story of what made the Chicago Union stockyards so unique and special throughout history. It was the best book I've read so far on that part of the meat packing industry. And it was just from a guy that grew up in the stockyards area of Chicago is essentially what it was. And he said when the stockyards shut down, he said that was kind of for him, that was the beginning of the end of the like the small American farmer, because at that point everybody they followed their cattle. When they sold their cattle, they followed them on the train. They rode the train to Kansas City or Fort Worth or Chicago or like Omaha, wherever the stockyard was. You followed your cattle there, and then you usually had to spend the night because you were selling your cattle the next day. And in the meantime, like you had you and your crew taking care of the cattle, and you had a night in town at the stockyards, and you'd mingle with the meat packing workers. And there was a strong bond between the urban blue collar worker and the rural man. And then when that stockyard shut down like that, I mean, it was just like a complete stop on the like that overlap between urban and rural. It seemed like for a lot of people.
I'm sure that's the case. I don't even remember when that happened, or what year that happened. But
It was like 71, I think, if I remember right. But
that's about 2 years before the big crash happened.
yeah, and it was really interesting hearing him talk about that. And I mean, being on the complete opposite end of the spectrum of me and you, where he was like he worked at the stockyards, so he was on the other end of it. But
yeah, but he was still in the world,
Yeah.
It was it was that part of it. And I haven't studied that aspect of it enough to know to comment on it, but it's I'm sure it was very as to why that happened. I really don't know. It'd be pretty interesting to find out.
Yeah. No, and I'm on the same boat. It was interesting to hear from, like I said, from a guy from the urban end of it, and a learned man, if you will.
Well, the problem is that and I don't know when this happened, but at some point the suburban urban and suburban ideas took over to where nobody seemed to understand where their food comes from.
Right.
And it's like, well, we just get it at the store. That's where you get it. And it's like they don't have a clue as to where their hamburgers come from, or even their lettuce, or whatever it is they're eating. They don't really realize that has to be grown by someone. That has to be the urban aspects of it have taken over to where they don't. It's not even in their. It's not even something that they consider. It never comes up. It's not in the menu.
Yeah.
The fact somebody else actually grows that or raises that or takes care of that, or it's no, you just go to the supermarket and you get it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great tragedy in that we've and that's something that's been coming for the last 120 years. I mean, it's our culture has made that shift from being an agrarian society over to being a an urban sort of a situation, and to where the only way to make a living now is to go to university and become a computer programmer, and anybody else is considered a toothless tobacco chewing rube, and you don't have to talk about it, you know.
Yeah.
Which is really unfortunate and not fair.
No, I agree. It's yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say where where exactly that whole disconnect really started, but
Well,
it's kind of the bane of technology is like it's
well, I'm not even sure it's technology. I think it's media.
mm,
Say 20, 25 years ago, I was working at a guest ranch, trying to make ends meet, and I was taking people out on horseback rides, and I had a guy who I would make conversation with these folks and trying to figure out, you know, how am I going to relate to them? I'll talk to them and visit with them and so forth. And this one guy was sort of a portly gentleman, and he was sort of balding and had eyeglasses on, and he was obviously out of his realm, but he wanted to go on a horseback ride. So I took him out and I visited with him. I said, well, what is it you do? And he says, well, I write for television and movies. I said, really? I said, yeah. And he mentioned different things that he'd written. It was like a movies of the week or something, and various television shows and so forth that he had written for. And he seemed a little, I don't know, he seemed a little melancholy. And but I said, well, I tell you what, partner. I said, I'm never going to have anybody here other than you who I can ask this question to. But I said, since you're a writer for this stuff, I said, you're going to have to explain to me, why is it every time that somebody in the television or the movies depicts someone from a rural background, they depict them as ignorant, toothless, tobacco chewing rubes? And he said to me, because the producers who put these shows together actually believe that's true.
yeah.
And I said, you got to be kidding me. He says, oh, no. He says, there's very few of them that are over the age of 35. And they believe that anybody who does not live in a city is an idiot.
That's wild.
That was that really threw me back. I had to really say, holy cow, that's amazing.
It's yeah, media is that's a whole different thing. It's yeah, it's I think we've kind of over the past several years that people have kind of somewhat woken up to about how just how fabricated the whole lot of it is, but it's I don't know. It's funny, you know. I think the Cowboys never the true working cowboy has never become real mainstream because they're too blunt and honest with their thoughts, you know. There's the media version of the cowboy, whether it be Yellowstone or you know the rodeo cowboy, and you know how like and God bless those announcers, they do a great job. They put on a show every night, but they really church it up as to what the working cowboy is, which is really just if you want to put it in the grand scheme of things, they're a blue collar worker that has to pay for all their own shit.
Absolutely.
And so they're just kind of your normal working guy that happens like that's the profession they chose because it's a hard work. It's hard work most of the time, and or it's boredom. if it's not hard work, it's boredom, and it's not for everybody.
Like the old saying is everybody wants to be a cowboy until it's time to go out and do cowboy stuff.
Yeah.
And then that's not so much fun.
Right. And but those always make the best stories. Nobody ever tells a great story about how everything went perfect. They tell the story about how something went haywire immediately.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's I don't know. It's I think that's kind of why like the cowboy hasn't ever made mainstream, because the true working cowboys ain't mainstream. You know, they're better they're better in doses than they are, you know, full time. You know, that's why, you know,
Well,
a lot of guys have been married 4, 5, 6 times, because they're married
they
more to
don't.
the job than they are the woman.
They don't do well in expressing themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just don't, and that's why we have the trouble that we have in the agricultural world dealing with the urban world. Is the fact that the urban world is more adept at being erudite with their arguments and their representations, whereas most of the people who are working in the agricultural world, the cowboy world, if you will, go into it because they're not interested in being well spoken
Yeah.
in a public forum. They don't want to mess with that. They want to go back out and deal with their horses and their stock.
I just want to go punch cows.
Exactly right. I'm not a public speaker. I'm cowboy. I do better with horses than I do with people from the media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as the world has grown smaller, the people that try to get away from the public become more and more of a public individual, and yeah, and sometimes that doesn't end up well. I don't know. It's but the cool thing about this technology is like cowboying, it's changed pretty drastically from the first, you know, Spaniard vaquero that ever threw a riata in North America, that to today. Like there's been significant changes, but at the end of the day, they still haven't figured out a better way to work cattle than by a cowboy horseback.
No, they haven't.
And that's why people still like, that's why a cowboy is still a job. I mean, it's changed a lot, but it's still a sought after job.
Well, and it's still well, as Baxter Black, who was a dear friend of mine, put it so succinctly, is that they're still out there. You just can't see them from the road.
Yep. Yeah.
You just can't see them from the highway. That's all.
Yeah, that's there was, my wife was telling me, and so before I let you go, I got to ask the question, but she was telling me about she had listened to I think an interview with you, and you were talking about how some lady told you that your song Tonopah had inspired her to take a little side route and a little detour and go through the town of Tonopah, which is just a little bit south of me, and I've been through there a couple times. And she was so disappointed, and I said, I said, what did he say? Did he say you looked better from the back of the horse? Because that's what he should have said.
No, it was that's a true story. I mean, she really was upset. She wrote me an email or a letter. I think it was an email, and she was really upset. The fact, why in the world would you want to write? You know, golly gosh, I spent 5 hours that day, you know, going out to see this place, and it was just awful. It was terrible. And I thought, you know, you just don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't get it. I suspect, and I don't know this for sure, but I suspect she lived in Glendale or Studio City.
Yeah,
and had an unrealistic idea of what the West was, and to me, places like Tonopah, which are boom and bust, and they contain just the epitome of people's hopes and dreams that get dashed.
yeah,
And yet they hang in there and try again and try again. And there's so much of that everywhere you go in the rural West. She didn't understand that.
Well, and you know,
I did not respond to her.
that well, if you had to respond, I would suggest saying it looks better from the back of a horse.
Well, it sure might, but even that, I mean, there are places up there that, yeah, obviously do look better from the back of a horse. And but the whole idea of the fact that people come out to these areas that are windblown and nothing but sagebrush and wind, and try to make a life, and keep trying in spite of every obstacle that's thrown in their way. There's something noble and beautiful in that, and if you can't see it, then maybe you ought to stay in Glendale.
Yeah, it's there's one thing that kind of stood out for me because I've read several books that went in depth on the Great Depression and in the Dust Bowl in particular. But when they talk about like the Great Okie migration to California, and there was a ton of Okies that moved out there, but they were all from like eastern Oklahoma, and they were sharecroppers for the most part. So they didn't own anything they had, but everybody that lived in the Oklahoma Panhandle, that was homesteaded ground, and they owned it outright.
Mhm.
And 75% of them stayed through the Dust Bowl. I mean, and like, granted, there,
Oh boy, that's tough people.
yeah, and but there's it goes to say something about like, and that's kind of what makes the American rural West so unique is we own this stuff, you know, there's I came out here, I planted my flag, I built my house, and this is mine.
You bet.
And there's something just unique about that
Well,
mentality.
It goes back 200 years.
Yeah.
The idea of the fact that you have the opportunity to go west and own a piece of ground and start over it, to build something that belongs to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the epitome of the American dream. And
Yep.
I believe that the idea of somebody having a piece of private property and be able to develop that and use that to raise their children, to raise their family, I think that is inherent in the idea of the American dream. And
Yep.
it goes all the way back to George Washington.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, and we just, I don't know, we just got blessed to be from people that settled the best part of America, you know.
I agree.
Before I let you go, my wife told me I had to ask you, what was it, or what is the favorite song of yours that you've wrote yourself?
Oh, it's always the last one you write.
And what one was that?
The last one I wrote, well, of any decency, was probably a song I wrote called "Good Dog."
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite right now. But I mean, I've written some since then, but nobody's heard them. So
Okay.
I'll say, as far as what's out there right now, probably "Good Dog" is "Good Dog," and that whole album is probably my favorite work at the time, right now, as of right now.
Well, good. That's that's really neat. We almost did a hour and a half, but I don't want to keep you any longer. I've wasted enough of your time, but I sure appreciate it, Dave, and I'd love to have you back anytime you want.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate that very, very much, and I hope this is entertaining to some of the cowboys out there listening.
Yes, sir. Where can they find all of your albums and anything else you got going on?
Oh, it depends on what their technological abilities are. But if they can find somebody who's computer savvy, you can just go online to davestamey.com and find everything there. And if you if you can't spell Stamey, you can go to Amazon.com and get close, and I think it'll probably come up.
All right. Well, thank you, Dave. I sure appreciate your time. And yeah, like I said, I look forward to doing it again anytime we want. You're welcome back. And well, we can talk some more cowboy troubadour type stuff. I think I find all of that stuff interesting. I enjoy the historical aspect of your songs, and it must be said you're pretty damn good guitar picker too. Like you've it's pretty apparent you've been doing it for a while because you're pretty good at it.
I have no other marketable skills.
Well, you found your niche, and good for you.
Well, I appreciate it, Matt. Thank you very, very much. And thank you to everybody who's out there listening to the Burning Daylight podcast. I appreciate it very much.
All right. Thanks, Dave. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Go follow his stuff anywhere you can find music, or davestamey.com. And it's for me. Go follow the patreon.com/burningdaylight. And yeah, move your ass. We're burning daylight.
There we go. Thank you.
You bet.
Your eyes up in the morning, beneath the stars so bright. Pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horses kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. We'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the saddle till the job's done right. Just together, and you won't catch 'em all. But when you ride through the gate, make sure you sit up tall. I can see the horizon, it's looking pretty bright. Well, get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the saddle till the job's done right.